upon a time, in a place called Galilee, there were 2 daughters. Neither of these daughters were important enough to be remembered by their own names because the society that they lived in created categories of importance, boxes that people had to fit into, and some people didn't qualify for, weren't worthy or deserving of a societal box with their very own name on it. This was a world, if you can imagine, where some were remembered and others lay in unmarked graves. One of the daughters was born to a middle or upper class man named Jairus, and we'll call her Jairus's daughter. This daughter is dying, and her father, one of the synagogue leaders, would do anything to save her life, to set her free from suffering. And he is surrounded by a community of faith who prays for her, who sends casseroles to Jairus's wife, who have created a GoFundMe page for the family's medical expenses. Oh, this is a well-loved daughter. The other daughter was poor. She either didn't have a family name worth mentioning, or she had been disowned by her wealthy, name-worthy family because of her condition. This woman bled all the time. She had been bleeding for as long as Jairus' daughter had been alive. This woman had been bleeding for 12 years, and she had spent everything, her last penny, on finding a cure. She had seen every doctor. She had suffered greatly. She never got better. She only got worse. She lived at the edges of society. She's known only by her condition, not her character. The unclean woman. Because society saw her that way. And if you touched her, you would be unclean as well. So despite this woman's God-given gifts, they pushed her to the margins. They restricted her movements. They kept her at the fringes with the others who were afflicted with similar conditions that made them unclean. It must have taken so much courage to sneak into that crowd, to bend low out of sight and risk everything for just one touch of Jesus's cloak. And yet we do not call her the courageous woman, the faithful woman. She is her condition, the unclean, not her character. How many of you have found yourself at some time known by your external condition, your gender, your sexual orientation, your disability, your illness, your perceived shortcomings, and not your character? How many of you have found yourselves refused a promotion, kept in the closet, silenced in a meeting, ignored by politicians because of the labels placed on you externally, which have nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with what someone else says you are? James Baldwin reminds us, the words you choose to call me and the prison you design for me reveals more about you than it does about me. It speaks to your soul condition, has nothing to do with my humanity. Otis Moss III, whose words are my sermon's illustration, says this: you must be some kind of powerful. We must be some kind of powerful that the people will spend so much energy trying to limit, control, constrict, cancel our power. Politicians fashion policies, economists produce theories, theologians design doctrines, scientists create categories, man manufactured labels, and one must know this, says Otis Moss, that the wall between your calling and constriction is thin. The moment you have, in the words of Paul Tillich, the courage to be, to lean into the truth of your sacred nature, is the moment you shall become the central character in the story of your own liberation. The central character in the story of your own liberation. Preach, Reverend Dr. Moss. Because make no mistake here, Jesus didn't heal this woman. He came to break down the boxes, to trash bad doctrine, to protest oppression in all its forms. And maybe she caught wind of what Jesus was up to, and maybe that's why she braved the trip to see him. But that last step on the road to freedom, oh, it was hers and hers alone. Jesus said so himself. Daughter, he said, daughter, your faith has made you well. She resisted. She resisted the powerful indoctrination that she had received at the hands of the religious. She pushed back on their assessment of her. She broke free from the box without a name, and she reclaimed her rightful place in God's family. Daughter, not follower, not friend, not even disciple. Daughter, son, child, you belong in the beloved rainbow family of God. It's your faith and not others' doctrines that will make you well. Indeed, it's Jesus who rails against these type of doctrines, against the world that would assimilate, oppress, and erase whole communities of people, coming instead to set the captives free from our death-dealing doctrines. When God chose to bring love incarnate into the world, God said, your misogynistic hierarchies be damned. I'm going to choose an unmarried woman to bring forth the Christ. And it was to women whose testimonies would never hold up in court, women like Mary Magdalene, who would later be the victim of a smear campaign by the church. It was to women that God chose to be the first witnesses of the resurrection. Christ has come to heal our wounds, to affirm our goodness. You belong in the rainbow family of God. On his way to heal the wealthier family, where a little girl lies dying, Jesus pauses to raise up the one that we call unclean and set the record straight. We dare not call unclean what God has declared clean. We are sons and daughters and children of God with the power to rewrite our sacred story. This is the story of two daughters, both claimed by the love of a parent who will do anything to end their suffering, from the physical pain of illness and the mental anguish of restrictions placed on our souls that have nothing to do with our godly nature and everything to do with the meanness of human nature. God sets us free. Christ shows us the way out of the box, and the Spirit gives us the push. Do you feel it? Because I think this is the day that some of us are going to be set free. And before you know it, a pride flag hangs in your bedroom, an orange shirt hangs on your tree, and a rainbow community of siblings from every race, gender, class, ability, orientation sits around your table. You haven't got time for the box with no name anymore, because you are the offspring of Christ, the inheritor of the kingdom, the beneficiary of the legacy of love. And there is good news to tell and much mending of God's world still to do. This is the day your faith has made you well. Thanks be to God. Amen.